Hi, everybody. I am Val Massey, the head of community for Consortium9, and the fellow surprised by me speaking is one of my co-workers. He's a producer at C9, and his name is Rick. You see him occasionally in our Discord. He is 1.1, the resident pun master. And he's going to be interviewing me today. This is our last Meet the Team episode. The plan was for Brooks to interview me, which would bring us full circle because the first Meet the Team episode was me interviewing Brooks, but he's got the Rona. And I'm just getting over the Rona, so I apologize in advance if I'm a little horsey or if I cough. Now, going back to Rick and his puns, I have prepared something. I was inspired by the Meet the Team interview I did with Fred when he had all his little Post-it notes and he writes thoughts on his Post-it notes and puts them everywhere. Rick, this is for you. If this is backwards, it says puppy punching tally. Every time you make a bad pun, I'm going to put a hash mark and I will go find a puppy to punch. Everybody loves puppies, so it's not going to be me that they hate. They're going to hate you because there will be puppies punched. I'm just warning you. Brooks Brown, what are you doing here?
Oh, well, I figured I'd save you from some puns, and I would just go ahead and say, Rick, you've got the time off. Go ahead and enjoy yourself. Yeah, enjoy. I'm gonna let the Meet the Team of Val not be done by me. Come on, Val. What are you doing?
Is this what you two were plotting earlier?
It may have been. It's all been a question of whether or not I'd be even close to lucid enough after a few days of COVID and also being in quarantine of being able to handle myself on camera and not embarrass by not being able to recall, say, your name. But it turns out my brain's working acceptably well. So, I was like,
I was suspicious when I popped in there and you two. Yeah.
Well, it's one of those things that, and you and I have a history, a long time friendship. And it's one of the things that I'm not going to miss the chance to sort of have, as we sort of document the process of this thing we're building, really go into it and have a conversation about how a lot of my career is owed to you and the way you behave, not just with community, but with friends and people you care about and everyone else. It's important to me that gets sort of mentioned and not, filled with puns and left in a questionnaire as a sort of side thing. Nothing against Rick. We love Rick.
Okay, I will change this to the how many times Brooks touched his nose tally instead.
Oh, there's going to be many. That's not
I'm sure, yeah.
That's not, it's me and Zizek, we've got a competition going. It's a running thing. But Val, I do want to start with, how long have I known you?
We've known each other about 20 years.
21 years. Yeah.
Not quite 21. It was
almost 21.
It was
so
like
it's, when I was writing my book, and I was writing video game reviews for anyone who would have me. And I was on the side doing coding and also Unreal mods, literally anything I could do to sort of pay the bills on top of trying to get in the games industry. You found one of my blog posts, if you remember, from oneup.com back in the day.
Right. Well, there's actually more of a story to it than that.
The television show with John Davison.
It was about being on the television show. Mm-hmm. But this is more of a story that leads into one of my crusades. It's not the how I met you so much as the why.
Yes.
So I have a passion for accessibility in gaming that started with my son Nicholas had a relatively rare form of muscular dystrophy. So that was the first time that accessibility really touched my life, in that you've got this toddler who can't play with the normal toddler toys. You know, there was nothing wrong with his mind. It's just his body was declining. So you can't just give him the little stacked up little donut things or a wooden spoon in a pot. Like, he couldn't do those things. So it became a real challenge to find toys or anything that would stimulate his mind and keep him happy and busy, but that he was physically able to manipulate. So that's when that kind of started for me. Years later, my brother my brother who gave me COVID, joined the board of directors.
We have lots of loved ones who gave us COVID. I'm not sure,
Yes.
not sure who did it. It wasn't my family, but I think my loved ones at the company were a little bit, I think I gave it to someone else at the company too. It spreads.
Yeah.
It spreads.
It's not even stranger danger anymore. It's like people you know. Anyway,
No.
My brother joined the board of directors for the Starlight Foundation, which is an offshoot of Make-A-Wish. Starlight Foundation was all about building like game rooms in hospitals where kids could go and play video games or just regular games. From there, I studied more about it, and I found out that people who are playing games, particularly video games, they heal faster, they require less medication. And it all kind of fed back to what I went through with Nicholas. And I'm like, once I got into the game industry, I felt like I really had a platform and could build a network of people who could help me on my crusade and more charities.
When you started, it was one of those things that I think a lot of people now, the idea of accessibility in games is, I would say, I don't want to say rote because it's still a thing to be fought for, but like Microsoft has an accessibility controller, for God's sake. Like they've done things that is light years ahead of where it was. But at the time we're talking about, even before like Child's Play charity existed.
That was the first one that I became involved with.
Yeah.
And I learned about Child's Play about the same time that I read that article on OneUp where you had written about, how you felt about people saying that violence was caused by video games. And you're going, no, that's not it. And the weird thing is, at this time when more people were finding out about accessibility and working towards that, there were stories about, EverQuest players that literally killed each other or, killed somebody in real life. There was a guy who was playing, I think it was EverQuest, sorry to pick on them, who just didn't want to deal with his kid. He had like a toddler, threw the baby in the closet so he could go on a raid, and the baby died. So there were all those stories coming out, and people like our friend Jack Thompson was going on the news, blaming everything like video games are the evil of the world. And here I'm trying to get people to donate money and do things that will help accessibility when I got jackasses like Jack.
And I got sort of thrown into that because it was my whole thing. And it's, I think at the time I didn't phrase it as well as I do now, but the power of play and games for anybody is so important that not just for, hey, I need something to do to keep busy, which I think a lot of people tend to think of video games as that, but much more in terms of like the ability to feel creative, the ability to feel like you've accomplished and done something.
Empowered, yes.
Empowered people to find themselves or to play with themselves. I know a project you also chatted with, and a lot of people did, was the Avatar project, where they actually took photos of people in real life, and you got to see like the kid, I'll never forget, who was like on every oxygen apparatus in the world in real life and frail, but playing a badass bounty hunter in I believe it's Star Wars Galaxies, I want to say. And the ability to sort of explore beyond themselves is so powerful and so huge. And this is what we ultimately connected on. It was that. But here I am, some asshole who's not in games. And here you are, who, you had done a lot. At this point, you were with NCSoft. I don't know if you want to give a little bit of your career and talk about what you've done to this point.
I was at NCSoft working with the Tabula Rasa team, which was Richard Gary. Again, going back to people who were kind of on the fringe, reeling it back just a little bit further in time. So I was a stay-at-home mom living on this little tiny farm in the middle of nowhere, Texas, just basically wiping other people's butts. I took care of Nicholas and my father and my grandmother, and then I had another kid. And I was isolated and miserable. I was a city girl. I didn't belong on a farm. And one of my cousins told me about Ultima Online, and he said, look, we can play together, because he lived in Houston about 3 hours away. So we could play together. It's on all the time, and it's kind of like Dungeons and Dragons. It wasn't. But anyway, so that was my doorway. And all of a sudden, here I was, I was depressed. So that opened a whole new world for me and changed my life. And when I had the chance later to work with the guys, with Richard and Star Long and other people who had been part of creating Ultima Online, it was amazing. It was amazing to be able to tell them how it changed my life and now be in a position where I could do that for others. You're talking about the kid with all the stuff on his face. I think his name was Jason. And
yes.
I knew him.
Yeah,
so
it was awesome. Like the personalities.
And he's
in
not
these
the only
people
one
is
like that. Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
I just loved the personalities were extraordinary, and it's. And if you go back to Ultima, that's another one of the things we bonded over was. That's also where I sort of hit this, oh my God, games can be so much more. Like it was one of the big sort of transformative games for me. And we started talking and you became very aware that my brother and I both wanted to be in the games industry. You became very aware. Well,
I asked you that I think I said, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, what are you doing now? And what do you want to do?
Not a lot.
And when you told me, I was like, dude, I know some people. I might be able to make that happen.
Yes. And until then, I didn't think it was really even possible. And so my brother and I, we needed a place to start applying. And you were really great. You gave me sort of early community work, working on Auto Assault, Tabula Rasa, like some early stuff. And then you said, by the way, there's this Austin Games Conference. It's at the time, I think it was called the game online games, MMO games conference.
I don't remember. Yeah, something. It was before the GDC people bought it. Yeah.
It was an online sort of conference. And you said, there's going to be a lot of recruiters. Come on down. And I was like, how? And you're like, stay with me.
Wasn't GDC in LA first where you little knuckleheads just drove in on a whim and you're like, we're just going to sleep in the car? With E3, whatever it was.
I think it was E3. Was it E3 first?
I think E3 was first because that's why your mom, when she met me, kissed me in the face, is because I wouldn't let you guys sleep in that garage.
That's
in
fair.
Murderville.
That's fair.
Yeah, we're here. We're just going to sleep in the car.
Yeah. It was very nice and kind of you. That was the year we also, my brother and I sort of worked our way to getting passes. So we were the first people in line to play the Wii, which was it's a cool little feather in my cap. I like that. But then it became we need to apply for jobs. So it was Austin Games Conference. We got to stay with you and you helped us do that, write the things, get there. And it was this incredibly supportive process of getting both my brother, who was the first to get in the games industry, got a job at EALA thanks to that very conference. And then myself sort of following that. I wanted to make sure we talked about that story because it's an incredible weird little thing. I always try to tell people when people are like, how do you get into games? And the answer is always talk to people. And generally in games, it's true. People in games will help you and support you because you need to know somebody. And the second thing is just literally hit the pavement. You don't have to literally do it, but just talk to people and go through it. I'll support. Val will absolutely. People, if you want into games, people are here to help. And I always use you as one of those examples. And I try to pay it forward as much as possible.
Let me give a little pro tip right here because we're talking about, the Austin Game Conference. And this is true of any of the conferences. The tickets to get in, the admission can be astronomical. It is not cost effective for a young person who's looking for a job to we're talking $600-700 sometimes, depending on the conference, plus the cost of lodging and food and this sort of thing. Aaron's story sounds cool, but it's not that unique where the person that Aaron met that helped him get into the game industry, it wasn't even at the conference. It was an after hours thing here in Austin. We have a place called actually literally 6th Street. And it's sort of like our Bourbon Street, the Austin version of New Orleans Bourbon Street. And there's just rows of bars and stuff like that. And if I remember correctly, Aaron was hanging out on 6th Street in one of the nights of the conference, and somebody that he met, and he just started chatting up. He found out she was a recruiter, and he gave her his demo, and there you go. Yeah. So you don't have to be at the conference. If you can at least get yourself
And
in
if you
the
do want to get in
area.
the conference, all the conferences are always looking for volunteers.
Yes,
And this is the other
yes.
thing I always, I was a conference associate with GDC. That was what actually got me my first real games job. That is, if you ever go to GDC, you see the people who are in some loudly, annoyingly, brightly colored shirt with a big thing on the back that says, "Ask me," or "I'm here to help. Do you have a question?" Like whatever that is. And your job is basically to help the conference go. GDC runs on volunteers. They don't talk about this, but GDC runs on volunteers. Every conference does. PAX does. All of them do. And it's an insular group of volunteers, but it's not hard to get in and make your way in so you can get a pass, so you can be there, so you can have your demo, so you can have your cards or be around the area. It's always worth it. It's always worth it.
Volunteering in general, whether it is like at a big conference like that or in a Discord. If you're a volunteer moderator in a Discord or on a message board or something, that's practical experience that me as a hiring manager will consider. You know, as long as I can go and see that you haven't been a complete twat. But that sort of stuff, yeah.
Well,
So
and it's
volunteering, that's kind of
experience.
how I got my start, was as a volunteer in Ultima Online and a volunteer writer for some of the game sites.
That's volunteer writer is a big one. I think if you're going to be writing, the number of game reviews I wrote for no dollars, or I think $30, I think was the most I got paid, is
I
depressing.
didn't get paid shit.
Yeah, no, some of them I did, and I was quite proud of that. They were mostly Barbie reviews because no one else would do it. I did a great article on Ben 10, and the video games of Ben 10. You do the work you have to, but it's that sort of story I love telling, because a lot of people get very discouraged when they want to get into games. I presumed there was just no way in. People are there to help. People are there to support, help, volunteer, take part, and sort of put your best foot forward. It does work out. Don't get taken advantage of, obviously. Find the right people, but
Right,
it does,
yeah.
I think,
Find
work.
your tribe.
Well, so post NCSoft and all of this time after I knew you there, you moved on and you went to work for one of the biggies as far as heavyweights go in the MMO universe with CCP. And I wanted to just chat through Eve.
I went back to CCP.
You went back to CCP.
Right, so I
back
started
to a hell of a
out-
position.
Right. So I started out going back to Ultima Online. One of my friends in Ultima Online, we had like a little player city together and all this. Mike Wallace was a game producer at Simon & Schuster Interactive. And I didn't know that, of course, when I first met him. He was campion and ran around and killed people. But eventually, you start to learn more about the real lives of people. And I found out, Mike was a game producer. At that point, I had no aspirations, no inkling that this would wind up being my career. It was just a cool guy that I played Ultima with. Like I said, I was wiping other people's butts. Anyway, so Mike contacted me and said that Simon & Schuster was going to publish this game that was being created in Iceland, and he needed a community manager. And he knew that I had done these events in Ultima, and I'd been a volunteer, and I'd written stuff for, other websites. So would I be interested? And I'm like, I'm not moving to San Francisco, which is where he lived. I'm not moving to New York, which is where Simon Schuster was. And I'm not moving to Iceland. And he said, well, you can work from home. Sold. So I started out, this is funny. What year was that? It was 2002. They would only pay me part-time, so I could get 20 hours a week at $10 an hour. You can't do that job for 20 hours a week. So I was working way more than 40, 60, sometimes 80 hours a week, and still being paid that, $200
Community
a week.
Community is brutal. Community is brutal.
That's when you know that you love it. That's the thing. There are a lot of things that I will do for love that I won't do for money. And to me, it was worth it. It was something completely different. I'd never expected to be able to do it. And like we were talking about Jason before, and Jason's not the only person like that. Fringe people, my people, the outer tribe, you meet them and they become part of your life. And to me, that was the awesome thing. And just all these opportunities I never expected to have, to go to places like Iceland and Finland and Morocco and just all the cool places I've been and cool things that I've done and amazing people that I've met, because I didn't mind working for $10 an hour back in the day.
Yeah.
Just for the record, I won't work for $10 an hour now. If you think
no, I know we went through that already. I had to pay you $12 an hour, and I'm still upset about it. But you do get more than 20 hours a week with us.
Yes.
Well, I think back to my first real job in the games industry, where I was doing production work and coding and QAing, and I was topping out at 32 hours a week at $11.50 an hour, living in downtown San Francisco, working on site, and that sucked. Like, because that you can't, there's no way you can do the work inside of 32. So you're doing more. You're just not really. It's a whole thing.
Is that when you had the little Vespa?
No, that was before the Vespa. I couldn't afford a Vespa on that salary. I was walking. I couldn't even afford Mooney passes. Like, it's wild. It was a different time, but it's one of those things. When I got to Lucas and I started working in community, and you talk about getting to know people in your community as being one of your sort of things that you love, and being able to have those relationships. It's hard for me to even come close to disagreeing. When I was working on Lucas, and I did for Star Wars, and
Wait, this is the first time I've ever heard you say that you couldn't come close to disagreeing. I need to clip this or something. I'm going to have this on replay.
Because it's the best part. And I want to sort of talk about some of the more crazy people you've met along the way, because, with Star Wars, you get very much the same thing. You get these ultra hardcore fans, even on Avatar. And people don't know there's like an ultra hardcore Avatar community. You get to know them, and you get to know them personally. Their trials, their tribulations, the stuff they're going through. And it's really tough to distance yourself from people in the community. Along those lines, who are some of the more extraordinary little moments? You don't have to name names, but I'm always curious of people's stories that really have stuck with you, especially given the wide range and breadth of product you've worked on.
Similar to the story that we've been talking about, Jason. This is going to get me emotional. To back up, I worked at Eve for 2 years. The company got into financial trouble, so that's when I was offered the job at NCSoft. Went there. The projects that I was on. So I went back to CCP and worked on Eve. So that's how all that happened. And I was at CCP for probably another 8 years. So when I went back to CCP, there was a young man named Jeremy. His real name was Jeremy. And I got to know him and his father. Jeremy was a quadriplegic. And his father was some kind of former big whoop-de-woo programmer for the government, like some kind of spook. Jeremy's dad, because Jeremy was part of an accessibility community, and Jeremy's dad went in and set up a certain area of space to where Jeremy and his friends could use voice commands to move around, because he couldn't even use a trackball or anything. So they could use voice commands to fly around and get to do the stuff that they wanted and needed to do. And that system was called Mandu. Jeremy's name in the game was Tax, T-A-C-S. So he would call it Tax Mandu, and just flew around. And he told me that he loved Eve because he could fly like an eagle. And sometime later, when he passed away, I didn't want to make a big deal of it, but just quietly, I went to the game designers and I said, can we do a little something to remember Jeremy. Sorry, I wasn't expecting to get like this. And they created a character called Tax. And you could go to Mandu and you could find Tax, and he would just give you, some little quest to do. It never said anything about Jeremy or that Jeremy had passed away. And
just made him
I sent
immortal.
sent these screenshots to Jeremy's dad. He was very thankful. And then I got a message sometime later from a friend of theirs that let me know that after Jeremy passed, his father was just so overwhelmed that he had a heart attack and died. But I think about those two guys that I never met, but I think about them a lot. And that's the kind of thing on the bad days, because the least favorite part of my job is people who are just assholes. They're just mean to be mean. They take advantage of other people. I got no time for that. And it can kind of wear you down when it's like another one and another one and another one in a very short amount of time. Usually I'm like the old woman in the shoe. I'm just like, get out of here. You're not bothering me. But, there can be times when it wears you down. So I think about people like Jason and Jeremy and some others that I've gotten to know. And it makes those times worthwhile. It's like,
Yes,
for every one of these little assholes, there's 10 people that are worthy of my time and attention.
It was my favorite community, and it wasn't even considered it at the time because this was 2010. Community wasn't even a term people used. But Lucas was deeply integrated with the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And if you want to talk about the coolest thing that George maybe ever did was just opening the doors to whatever a kid wanted with Star Wars, done. And that stuff, and those are the heavy versions, but even the fun, having a weird meetup and suddenly meeting people in person for the first time. And it turns out they are the goofy fuck that you thought they were online,
or they're not.
Or they're not. It turns out they don't talk to people. They're shy in real life, and they won't even be around.
I've had it go both ways, yeah.
And they're the most strong personality on your forums, or I guess for us, our Discord, but they're actually quiet in real life. Seeing that sort of divergence, I also always loved because it's just always been fascinating to me. Because community, as you get to the heart of people, and I'm going to be getting to us in a minute because I'm really fascinated about the transition away from the traditional MMO space, which, EVE isn't exactly a traditional MMO, but it's a far sight closer to that versus what we're doing, I guess would be the way to put it. That transition over to what are effectively, as they call themselves, crypto degens, but crypto people who are interested in what we're doing, are very odd community. That change, how have you found yourself making that switch as we've gone from a place I know you're very comfortable, sure, I'll run community, whatever. And it's yeah, how about this? And it's wait, what? For what? Huh? Who? Huh? And then we have this very strange community. I just would love to hear your thoughts on that sort of transition, when I hit you up and what you thought about that moment.
Well, I remember our first conversation about this was on New Year's Eve day, when we would text occasionally. It's not like we call each other up all the time. And I looked later to see when the last time was that I'd heard from you. And it was when we had the snowpocalypse a couple of years ago, because Aaron, your brother, lives here in Austin too. And you're like, Aaron's okay. I just want to check and make sure you're okay. So I'm like, and all of a sudden you just call me up and you're like, hey, are you still doing the community thing? And initially I thought that you were looking to hire someone and you just wanted some insight about what the salary range might be, what skills to look for, which I thought was weird because you should already know that. But I was like, okay, well, he's asking, I'll answer. And then I found out that you were asking if I wanted to join the team. And I told you straight up, I know nothing about this NFT stuff. I don't understand it. I don't understand the crypto thing.
And I think I said to you, don't worry, no one does.
That's what you said. And you said, I just need you to know the stuff that you know. I know the rest of it. I just need you to do your thing. And I was like, okay. Well, it was a little bit harder decision than that because I was on another team and I hate quitting jobs unless I have a boss who is a certifiable
whack job.
Satan's bunghole.
various terms. No, but when we talked, and it was like, I started going through, I need people to do things for me. And there's stuff I know that, like I always make the joke, I can do everything at the company. I just wouldn't hire myself to do it. There's a handful of exceptions for that, and community is one of them. I know I like doing the community thing, as is evident by me sitting in our Discord and chatting with people fucking all hours of the night.
And being all up in my colon.
Yes, all the time. I really love talking to people, and I really love interacting and having these conversations. And it's, but in order to prevent me from overdosing that, I needed someone I could leave to do it and know that the community will be cared for. Because having watched from the inside at some places, from the outside at others, communities be formed and then basically run deeply cynically. I'm going to build community. Here are the metrics. That's all I care about. Versus building a true community where people are helpful to each other, caring. To me, that starts at the top. And the top is whoever the fuck is in charge of the community. And that's a perceptual thing from the outside. Like we could debate all of that, but I needed someone I could go, the tone is going to be set. And I don't have to think twice about it. Otherwise, I will be in there fucking every day setting the tone myself, and I'll hate myself inside of maybe a month. Like I knew I'd fucking hate myself. I got super into the Lucas Twitter. Like how bad I went when I was running that was wild. Because I would just all day. And anytime someone tweeted, I'd respond. I believed it was the most important thing, and I got super deep into it. And I couldn't do that here because I've got a lot of other shit to build and work on. And so I was like, there's only really one person I know that I trust to just like set it and forget it, Ron Popeil style. And that's kind of what it's just
youngsters today don't know who Ron Popeil is. I will tell you, true. Like some of it is very familiar. It's like, oh yeah, I know how to do this. I know how to do these things. Like, being careful about messaging. You have to be as careful what you don't say as what you do. So I know how to do that. The big surprise for me is the nefarious people, the thieves, the scammers. Like in every game I've played, there have been scammers, but it was never as like high stakes or as dangerous as it is in this space. It's the community group is really kind of a fucked up place because usually it's your job is to provide a comfy, insular, good place for conversation, but you're also like an inoculation. Your job is to protect and defend. And it's a weird double-edged that. And there's only so much I can do though. Yeah. I can't reach through the screen and slap somebody's hand so they don't click that link. Including you, because it happened to you too. You were busy, somebody sent you a link, you just weren't even thinking, you clicked it, and boom. So it can happen to anyone. Yeah. And there's only so many reminders that we can make per day or so many ways to message it to tell people this is dangerous. And it's not just losing a virtual sword. I got PK'd and looted and Ultima Online, had a keep, got looted, lost everything.
I ran a PK guild with my friends.
Right. So that's
people loved us.
Virtual goods. When you start talking about NFTs and you start talking about real money, that's different.
It's very different. And you hear, I was fortunate to be able to recover mine. It was not cheap to do so, but you hear about other people getting wiped out of, 100 ETH worth of stuff or even more, 10,000 ETH, like insane shit that I've seen people get stolen over the course of the last year. And like they're worth more than me. Like that's all I can think. Some of these, it's how do you even handle that? How do you think through that as a community person, as the head of it? How do you strike that balance between, because you could overcorrect and be like, some of the NFT projects, you have to own it to be part of the community. They do not allow people who aren't wholly verified owners to be in. We'll have some part of that probably someday, but
I think Boardbox is like that. And then how Board Elon is doing it. Yeah.
I want to
Shout
say
out to
G Money's
Box.
true. G Money's Admit One is like that. There's a lot that have, and there's some things are like that's great. But then, how do we handle that? How do you think? Like, how do you think about this process of striking that balance in a way that keeps things open yet safe?
Well, going back to my crusade about accessibility and inclusion, the platform that we're building, Nor, our first game, which isn't really named yet publicly, but your whole thing, even your Twitter handle, play is free. The game is going to be free. So if we exclude people from our Discord, these could be some of the greatest players we'll ever have. They could bring in more players. And you want a lot of players to make your game world vibrant and exciting. They may not be able to afford to be part of the crypto side of things, and that's okay. So I don't want anybody to be excluded. That means that my wingman, got to give a shout out to James Egan. I know I gave him a lot of grief, but I could not ask for a better wingman than James Egan.
Very much. We love Egan.
We have to be very diligent, and we are extremely grateful for our shadows, the volunteers that help us on Discord, because notorious in Discord, you get all these bots. It'll be one person running 6 or 8 or 100 accounts that either they're there trying to steal somebody's aspects, or they're just there because they're getting paid to be there, not by us, but by somebody else. So trying to keep that to a minimum, but at the same time, keeping the atmosphere friendly. If someone's NFT gets stolen, I can't do anything about it. I am absolutely powerless. So again, that's when our community comes in. We've seen it happen where they help each other. Glow, one of the shadow volunteers, has been instrumental in helping several people recover their NFTs.
It's been amazing to watch. To go back to your comparison of virtual items versus NFTs or digital goods as they are now. Back in the day, if you went, this person scammed my account, period, everyone laughs at you. Like, that's the end of the conversation. People are like, that's what you get, or something like that. We haven't seen that at all. And we've seen the opposite, where everyone's like, here's the support, here's this, here's how you can do this, here's some ideas, here's some links. I'm not as hyper versed in crypto as a lot of the people in our Discord who are absolutely like super natives to the space. And they just went, here's some links, try this. Here are some ways to send messages. If I didn't realize there was a certain messaging service. There's some things that I did not know. I feel stupid now not knowing, but I mean, that's how it works. Everyone learns something new every day, but they've just taught me so much, and they're ready to support and be there. And again, to your point about how to set up a community and why I love how we've ended up, even the volunteers have volunteers. And even the people who aren't really volunteering are helpful volunteering. Yes. So it's, as I said, it's a weird community. And that's like one of those things I really love that we've been able to foster.
I'll pop in and look to see what other communities are doing. I mean, it's something I've always done through my whole career. It's just a good idea to do some research and some recon. And, maybe they're doing some cool stuff that I didn't think of. And I go into those Discords and it's just, did you eat? When did you eat? A lot of GM, good morning, good morning, good morning. And there's no...
My favorite has been the bots talking to each other. And we've seen, like, early on, we got a lot of those when we were doing our whitelist, because you say whitelist and it's like, it's a fucking bird feeder. It's a salt lick for those guys. And the bots show up and you get like, my favorite is like when it's clear that I don't think there's anyone there. And I started interjecting and making comments. And I warned the community, I'm like, I'm going to say some stupid shit here. And everyone was just kind of cracking up, but it was like the way that they just have their own conversation chains. And that, to me, is the worst thing. It's one of the problems with, in general, social media, but for sure Discord, is when they come in and the bots, it pushes all the real conversation up above the fold. I guess for us, it's above the fold in Discord, and it's gone. And so having a community who's vigilant against that and watches it, and again, talks, is so great. People come in, we don't have the billions of activity that's garbage. We have really interesting, specific, long critiques from people. And I want to kind of get into that because we have, we'll say, I don't want to like single anyone out because we have a lot of amazing personalities, but we have some quirky ass people that I love. Because I am one. And like, I'm a weirdo and I know how I sit.
Game
like,
recognizes game.
I do. And so when we get these, like, I want to say multi-page screeds of like explanations or thoughts on what we're doing that are intensely deep and in directions that we hadn't considered or we have. And it's a few times I've had to tell people, shut the fuck up. We haven't announced that yet. Go away. Fuck off. It's crazy how many steps ahead. Again, to compare and contrast between this audience and old school, how do you see the difference between that level of interaction or that level of fandom as it kind of extends? Because I didn't see it at this level in any community I've ever worked. And I worked on fucking Star Wars. And
one thing, and this is another pro tip, and this is for people in communities, not just ours, but any community. Just like those of us who are in community management, who, we're involved with communities and we're doing the messaging, less is more when it comes to writing text. People don't like to read. It's a phenomenon. They'll go read a book, but they don't want to read some 3-page thing about, any kind of announcement or whatever. So you need to keep things short and concise. That's a bit of an art form. So for people in the community, if you want to increase your chances of other people, whether it's other people in the community or people on the game team, to actually read what you're saying, don't do these multiple walls of text.
There is an exception. There's one exception to that rule, and that's me. I read literally almost only the longest. Like, I go nuts for that stuff. I want to encourage people to be shorter because brevity is the soul of wit, and I do believe that. But I've enjoyed having discussions over these very, very long things. And again, the way that they're written, it's dense. I just want to make sure we're not, but they have their place. I'm a weirdo
but you asked my opinion, so yeah, I'm giving my opinion. That's your opinion. But here's one of the problems. Is that when I see something like that, first of all, I have the attention span of a gnat on crack. Like I will fight so hard to pay attention to something. And like if I'm reading a book, I'll wind up reading the page 3 times. If I'm watching a movie, I got to back things up because I wasn't paying attention. So these big posts, it's very difficult for me sometimes.
I must drive you fucking nuts then.
You do. To distill it down so that I can go to somebody else on the team, whether it's Fred or Micah or anybody, and say, hey, this person's asking this question. I can't send them the whole big thing because they're not going to read the whole big thing either. So help me, help you, help us by kind of shortening it down. And then you can send Brooks all your long rambling things because he likes them.
I do. I like doing long rambly things myself, so it works out for sure. But on that note, as we start talking, I like that stuff. I've always liked that stuff. I like going a little bit deeper into these things, and one of the things I was sort of getting at is the difference between the way it worked in traditional. You don't see those posts. Those posts, long posts, exist from angry people, right?
Not always.
Yeah,
no, there's
often.
No. Angry people, that's a whole nother thing and we could get to in a minute. But the long posts, and I'm thinking of, there's 2 or 3 people in our community right now.
No, I'm not talking about our community. I'm talking about in traditional MMOs.
They're not angry. They're not always angry. They have an idea that they think is better than whatever is already in the game or that needs to be added to the game.
I count that in the
feel
angry.
Like that's not angry. It's like,
yeah, it is.
Because angry people, really angry people, will just go away. Those are the ones you have to worry about. The ones who just get mad and they leave. But if somebody takes the time to tell you, or even to send hate mail, the best hate mail I ever got was when I worked for CCP. I guess they didn't know that I didn't actually live in Iceland. And they sent this hate mail that said, if Iceland had trees, I would tell you to go hang yourself.
Lovely.
But instead of reading that and getting mad, first of all, I'd laugh my ass off because it's pretty funny. And second, I don't live in Iceland, and there are some trees that you could, they do now. They're working on it.
They're working on it.
But the community person in me sees that kind of stuff, sees those complaints, the angry letters or the angry messages. And what I've learned to interpret that as is, I love your product, whether it's your game or whatever. I love this. And I want to be a part of it. I want to buy it. I want to use it. But this thing is stopping me. And I want you to address this thing. Yeah, and then I have to figure out what it is that's making them angry. But it's one of the reasons
that I really thought you'd be perfect for this. And I think you've been sublime, and Egan too, with the background in Eve. Eve is a unique game with a unique type of people who play it. We used to joke and say it was the world's most exciting spreadsheet, which I think is fair. The way that
I won't say what I say about it.
Yeah,
it's not polite.
The people who play are in it. There's not a lot of them. It's not like it's 5 or 6 million people, but they're in, and they want to have a long discussion of economics and this trade route and how it works, and like they want to get into the mechanics. That's their type. I think I'm coming more from the broad, the tabula rasa type crowd, for example, or the Star Wars crowd who. They don't have that depth of desire very often. It's very rare that takes the place. Instead, the people who do that long thing, they tend to be ranty. Our community does have that same thing as, you used to see it in Eve. James just mentioned it in the screeds about how the game works and everything were huge. Eve had extraordinarily long tomes people would write. And I guess that feels like a lot what we're getting, because we have that kind of people. We have people who care about the economics, who want to talk about the theory of it and really get into the deeper side. But I find it just fascinating.
There were two facets of Eve, though, because I started right as we were getting into alpha. So mostly at that point, outside people outside the company had not seen the game. They knew very little about it. So they were designing it in their heads and on the message boards. That's when you would see these big, long posts where they're like, I would like to see this in the game and that, and it's going to be like this and that. And once they did start seeing the game and eventually started to play the game, the community shifted. A lot of those early adopters, this was not the game they had created. This was not the game that they wanted, or in their heads felt like they had been promised, even though they weren't. They went away. Very few of them stuck around through launch. But then we had this whole new group. And that's a very familiar feeling to me right now, where we do have a core community and Discord that I feel pretty confident 85% of the people that we see every day and that show up for the Amazon and all that they'll be around, because they're not just interested in the game that we're creating. It's the whole experience.
The whole thing.
But not all of them will. There are some people that came in and they're like, this doesn't sound like it's for me. And they peace out.
Not going to be able to earn money day one by tripling their Ponzi scheme investment. I know it's terrible that we aren't doing that. I agree.
Right. So I don't get skeevy about the numbers that we see in Discord, or when somebody has been really active and then they kind of fade away. I wish that people would tell us why.
I look at general activity of any of the NFT projects, and we see Discords that have 150, 200,000 people on it, and then their actual NFT sale goes up and they have 300 wallets that collectively have 10,000 NFTs. That makes me go, I'm kind of okay having our fucking 95% diverse wallet base for all of our NFTs and having a huge swath of people who are, in my mind, some of them are there to hold and sell. Good for you guys. Some of them are here to be a larger part. Some are glancing. But I feel like that setup puts us in a weird, it kind of goes into my big question then, because this is all fun to talk about the theory of it, the ideas, but every day you have to get up and you have to open Discord and you have to find the willpower within you to go, oh yes, I will engage with all of these people. What gives you that? And don't just say paycheck, because I know that ain't the answer. I know it's a good answer, but what gets you excited? What inspires you every day as you step into Discord and you start sending your gifts and you start saying hi and you start interacting? What's the thing?
It goes back to what I said at the very beginning, finding your tribe, knowing that there's someone in there that is maybe on the fringe. Here's the thing. It's like when I was a little kid, I always ask this question in the Meet the Team interviews, so I will answer it myself. When I was little, the, kid of the early 70s, people would say, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would say I want to be go-go dancer. Because this is the time with like beach blanket bingo, and you would see the girls in the cages with the cool boots. Like, that's what I want to be. And I'm sure it mortified my poor parents. Eventually, growing up, I was like, you know what? I think I want to do advertising. I watch these commercials. They're cool. I want to make commercials. I want to go into advertising. And started college. I hated school. I just hated school. Couldn't do it. And then I realized what I really wanted to be was the Kool-Aid mom. The cool mom in the Kool-Aid commercials who everybody's playing in her yard. She's got snacks for everybody. You can scrape your knee. I didn't have that. I had a single working mom. I didn't have a mom who stayed at home and brought Kool-Aid out for my friends and me. I had a couple of friends who did, and I was like, that's the gig I want. That's the person I want to be. I want to be that cool Kool-Aid mom. And this sounds cheesy, but in a lot of ways, I feel like I am now. Except, these are grown folks. They're not little kids in the neighborhood. And the neighborhood is the fucking whole worldwide internet.
I'm flattered you consider some of us grown folks. And I think a few other people would be flattered too.
But really, that's it. It's like, some days, it's kind of the same, that there are the same basic things that you have to do every day. But I don't know what's going to happen. You might say something that I feel, oh shit, Brooks said this thing. I got to go undo it. Or you say some good news.
Undone yet. I've been pretty good as far as shit goes.
Not undone,
not
but maybe, maybe kind of massage the edges a little bit.
Fair. I have a brashness, I suppose.
It's like when you were doing that thing last week at the conference, and I'm just going, I messaged Egan, and I was so like,
fun.
Language, Brooks.
Oh, it was so fun. I only said fuck 3 times.
Exactly. I know, because I counted.
I was very proud of myself.
I mean, we do that. People, and not only that, but come on, if you're on the internet and an F-bomb offends you, really?
I had
what are you even doing
promised
here?
I wouldn't swear. So, anyway,
so that is, I get excited in the morning. I'm usually a let me have some coffee and wake up for a little bit kind of person, but I will have that first cup of coffee and my phone in my hand so I can look to see what happened to Discord while I was sleeping. Did we get 200 people calling themselves Welcome to NOR, trying to scam our community members? And, did Egan wake up at 2 a.m. and ban all of them so I don't get to? Egan, he's a replicant. He doesn't sleep like a normal person. Anyway, so that's it. Like, legitimately, that is it. Is, the some of it is very familiar, but there's also an element of the unknown. And that's the exciting part for me. What are we going to get today? Life is like a box of chocolates.
We got a lot coming, and we got a lot more coming. It's going to be fun. I just want to say, I'm glad to have you. I think the community's glad to have you. And I had to be the person who did this interview. I had to be the person who sort of closed this out.
I'm proud of you. I say that all the time, but I am proud of you.
Aren't you sweet? Be proud of me in a year when we launch and we're like killing it and successful.
No, I may not be so proud of you now, but today in this moment, I'm proud of you.
Oh, well, I'm glad. But no, I think with that, is there any last notes before we bounce out? And
no, I haven't seen any questions in the live chat on YouTube, so I guess we're done.
Yeah, I like we went a little bit more into the emotional, deeper side. That's what I wanted to touch on a lot of stuff that I knew that other people didn't know about some stuff, and I know I made you cry, which normally I wouldn't be as proud of, but I thought it was stories like that are the reason, and I know a lot of them. That is one story, and I know many of them, and it's one of the reasons that I really am glad to have you leading the charge on community, and I'm glad to have you being the mother to all of us who are
the Kool-Aid mom, the cool Kool-Aid mom,
as however it went.
And
so thanks.
I'm gonna drop some links, I guess maybe on my Twitter at Pantastic. It's PANN-tastic.
2 N's. Pan, PANN,
yes.
Pantastic.
About accessibility stuff. If you just want to learn more about it, if you want to support some of the amazing groups that are out there. And I will also maybe put it in the YouTube description when the final video is up. But thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you for calling me on New Year's Eve day, Brooks Brown.
Yeah. You're not the only person at the company who got a weird call out of nowhere from some asshole they sort of knew. Wait, what are you doing? Yeah, no, I'm doing a thing. What? I don't know. Okay.
The funny thing is, I got to tell this really quickly, because I don't know about crypto stuff, I asked my husband, Patrick, and here we go back to Ultima Online. 2 out of my 3 husbands I met in Ultima Online. Patrick was the upgrade that I needed. And met him in Ultima. Anyway, I asked him, I was like, what do you think about this? Showed him the stuff that you showed me. He was the one that was like, tell him to send the contract. And broed up instantly in love with you. So I was like, well, Patrick feels good about this.
We have a cool project, and we're doing genuinely, I believe, important work on top of fun work. And that's the best combination that there is. So
well, thanks for bringing me along for the ride.
Absolutely. And thanks for taking a moment and being part of this. This was great.
Thanks. Bye. Thanks everybody for watching.